He was referring, of course, to the pre-Christian pagan world. This was followed, he said, by the Aeon of Osiris, a time of restriction in which man rejected the natural world and in its place chose denial of the ego and mortification of the flesh. He believed that a new Aeon, the Aeon of Horus, had begun. In Egyptian mythology, Isis was the goddess of fertility, Osiris was the god of death, and Horus was the god of rebirth. The period of restriction, he said, had ended and the life energies had returned to the world. The pre-Christian pagan world was more, however, than simply a time of nature worship. Men lived in greater harmony with the natural world than they did during the cycle of restriction which followed, but they also celebrated the carnal, exalted the ego, and explored deep philosophical thought. This was the time of the mystery schools and the philosophers of Greece. This was the time of the great empires of Babylon and Rome. This was the time when men discovered astronomy, mathematics, and science. The Aeon of Isis was not a single Aeon but a succession of Aeons in a cycle of expansion. The religions which rose during this time involved the worship of fire or of planetary bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars. 2,100 years ago, the previous cycle of expansion ended and the cycle of restriction, which Crowley calls the Aeon of Osiris, began. Like the Aeon of Isis, the Aeon of Osiris was not a single Aeon but a succession of Aeons in a cycle of restriction. The fact that the Aeon of Osiris was not a single Aeon with one law is evidenced by the fact that there were many religions established during the cycle and many sects within each religion. There were also many different concepts as to who God was and what was expected of man from God. It may be said that the law of the Aeon of Muhammad was there is one God and Muhammad is his prophet. It may also be said that the law of the Aeon of Christ, or Aeon of St. Paul, was only through the Son can you approach the Father. The significance of this is that all Aeons established within the cycle of restriction had a common theme: rejection of the natural world, denial of the ego, repression of human needs, mortification of the flesh, and obedience to church and state. Crowley identified that a new cycle of expansion had begun and the cycle of restriction had ended. He referred to this cycle as the Aeon of Horus, but the Aeon of Horus was only the first of many Aeons within the cycle he had identified. The god Osiris had passed through the land of the dead and was now reborn as Horus. The bright and glorious child was reborn and now sat upon the throne of his father. This fit beautifully into Crowley's Egyptian schema, but the doctrine of Thelema failed to transform the world, as he believed it would. The religion of Crowleyanity attracted few followers at the time, but the child grew and was weaned. And in 1966 it went out to play with its friends. Anton LaVey referred to a cycle of expansion as an age of fire and to a cycle of restriction as an age of ice. The age of ice had ended, he said, and a new age of fire had begun. LaVey's age of fire was Crowley's Aeon of Horus and LaVey's age of ice was Crowley's Aeon of Osiris. It was another way of expressing the same truth. The Age of Fire began in 1904 with Crowley's revelation in the desert, but 1966 marked the beginning of the second Aeon within the cycle of expansion. The Aeon of Set. The period from 1966 to 1975, often called the Age of Satan, was a transitional period between the Aeon of Horus and the Aeon of Set. The Age of Satan represents the time during which both Aeons were active. In 1975, the Aeon of Horus had finally ended. The Aeon of Lucifer, similarly, began in 1991. The period from 1991 to the year 2000 was transitional. Both the Aeon of Set and the Aeon of Lucifer existed simultaneously during this time. The Aeon of Set ended in the year 2000. The bright, glorious, and unconquered child had been reborn. It had grown from an infant to a child and then into a teenager. Crowley celebrated its birth. Loewe sent the child out to play with its friends. Aquino called the child in to study for its finals. The years of the Church of Satan were a carnival, followed by those of the Temple of Set and its focus on intellectual pursuits. At the end of the 20th century, the child approached manhood. The year 2000, and the declaration of Deus as the word of the Eon of Lucifer, marked the beginning of the child's adult years. The focus now is no longer on intellectual development but on personal responsibility and the pursuit of power. A child thinks only of itself and immediate gratification of its needs. A man, however, considers his role within a society and satisfies his needs through the setting of long-term goals. The Eon of Lucifer is a new Eon, the third Eon in the present cycle of expansion. It builds upon the two previous Eons and shares a common theme with all other Eons of the current cycle of expansion. The law of the Eon, Thelema, Zephyr, Deus or will to come into being, as a god incorporates the words of the two previous Eons. Concerning the rituals, the demonic Bible is written upon parchment made from human flesh in ink made from human blood in a strange alien script, the language of the demons, dark gods from a time before the creation of man. This dark book contains the magic of the ancient ones. Many of its rituals involve human sacrifice, cannibalism, rape, and torture. The demonic Bible has been revealed, at least in part, to those sorcerers and magicians throughout history who have walked the dark path. These magicians have translated passages from the demonic Bible into various languages, often changing certain words in order to hide the true nature of the work. The Grimoire of Abramelin the Mage, the Clavicula Salomonis, the Book of Shadows, and the Necronomicon are among the many books transcribed from the dread pages of the demonic Bible. The demonic Bible was shown to the magician John Dee. Dee translated 18 of the demonic keys from the strange demonic language in which the demonic Bible is written. When Dee translated his keys from the demonic Bible, he named them the Enochian keys. They are not, as is commonly believed, named for the Enoch who walked with God but rather for Enoch, the son of Cain. Cain was the first man to perform the rituals of the demonic Bible and he murdered his brother as a sacrifice to the ancient ones. His son, Enoch, was given to the serpent from birth. This demonic language revealed to Dee during his scrying experiments is written in an ancient script which has been passed down for centuries by practitioners of the black arts, many of them unaware of its origins. This script has been called by various names, but is most commonly known today as the Theban script or the witch's alphabet. The formulas in this book were revealed to me in part by my unholy guardian demon, the spirit Aziel, and also in part by Astaroth, Asmodeus, Moloch, and Beelzebub. This book includes many of the formulas given in the demonic Bible but is not the entire demonic Bible, the unholy book being thousands of pages in length in its entirety. When originally revealed to me by the spirit Aziel, this work included only the crossing of 4 gates, corresponding with the 4 princes of hell, and an extraneous book dealing with the invocation of the dead. I performed the rituals and experienced the crossing of the gates within extreme